Alright guys, I want to talk to you about something today called target fixation. In motorcycle racing you have this idea of target fixation where when you see a crash going up ahead of you, you have a tendency to want to look at that crash, and what ends up happening is you get target fixated on that, and even though you're trying to avoid the crash, because you're looking at it, you go right at the crash and you become part of the crash. So the same premise can be applied. We see it in jiu-jitsu where guys will try and go for an arm bar, and they're trying to put an arm bar on an individual, and that individual blocks it. And the one guy who is trying to apply the arm bar, he never lets it go. He continues to attack the arm bar, attack the arm bar, attack the arm bar, and he's trying to get it, and he just can't, and he's trying to force it and muscle it and so on and so forth. This is a problem with a lot of combatives programs, particularly ones where you go to a 2-week school or a 6-week school or whatever, and they don't really have the time to elaborate in detail things like transitions, things like options that you would get from an actual formal Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or an actual drawn-out lengthy combatives course, something that you're spending years in as opposed to a week or two. So when we have a knife, one option, well, let me back up a little bit here. We'll start off with boxing. Any fight that you get into, you can watch any fight on YouTube, any kind of amateur type situation, and what you're going to end up with is you're going to end up with two guys that are squaring off, and they are just punching each other in the face. So, RJ here is punching at me, and I'm blocking, and then I'm trying to punch at him, and I'm staying constantly right here. I'm staying in that kill zone. He's staying in mine, and we're just teeing off and punching each other in the face. The problem is that I get target fixated on only hitting the face. Whereas if I have other options where I'm coming here and then I drop in and I shoot one right into the breadbasket there and just drop him and buckle him over, then the face becomes open. So I have other options. This is kind of the premise of some of the things that we do in MMA, where we have that option to tee off, and I'm striking at him, I'm hitting high and low, and then maybe I'll come in and I'll attack the leg. And the leg may seem like something that is not particularly my main focus or a main target, but the fact of the matter is footwork is 90% of a fight. And if I can take out his legs, I take out his footwork. That prevents him the ability to cut angles like we've talked about in other cases. So now he becomes essentially immobile in the sense where he has to stand directly in my kill box and tee off with me. So it is a target. It may seem like a secondary target, but it's a good option for me to attack. So don't get target fixated on the head. By the same token, when I have a knife, I have the tendency to want to focus on this. And you see this a lot with guys who take that strong lead forward grip. They think that because this knife is forward, all of a sudden this is some kind of laser beam light shield or whatever that is going to keep this individual away. It's not. A knife is an offensive weapon. It is not a defensive weapon. What ends up happening is because I have this knife, all of a sudden I become target fixated on the fact that I have a weapon. And I take all of my other avenues, all of my other alternatives and assets, and I bring them to the background. Instead, if I use that knife as a force multiplier, I can now maintain that same fighting stance that I use in every other situation of training. I can maintain that same footwork, the same handwork, the legs, everything, but now I have a force multiplier where I add the knife in, and it becomes something that just greatly increases my effectiveness. So, for example, as I'm sitting here and I go for a strike on RJ and he's blocking, and I come in and he blocks, and I come here and he blocks, whatever the situation calls for, but then, now when I add in other things, so now I come in with a strike, and now I come across with a cross, or I come here and I come across, or maybe I lead in with a leg and then I come in with a knife. I'm by no means saying that you should be high kicking Taekwondo, this dude in the face or anything like that, and then follow up with a knife. The idea is that I want to keep my base, I want to keep my balance, but I have other assets that are available to me. It is infinitely harder for him to not just deal with the knife if he has to deal with other things. But if I am target fixated on only attacking with the knife, then he becomes singularly focused on the knife as well, and then it's really not even that difficult. And a lot of combatives programs teach this methodology of him only focused on the knife. You need to focus on the whole, because there's a whole lot more going on. And if you are the individual with the knife, you need to focus on the fact that you have other assets available to you. So the same thing can be said about the gun. Whenever we present this thing, guys have a tendency to want to present this out. Guys, just because the gun can shoot far doesn't mean that it needs to. Alright? It will work every bit as effective here as it will here. There's no reason for me to press out to him or anything like that. I want to keep this thing in retention where I can keep it in control. But for you guys who get it out there and then he has a tendency to grab a hold and he gets offline and he's working on disarms, what ends up happening is I have that tendency to want to focus on the pistol, so I end up grabbing a hold and I end up pulling it back, and then he ends up pulling back, and we end up in this, basically this 50-50 tug of war, when in reality I have other options available. If I can secure this into my chest, then I can fire an elbow, I can come into the groin, I can come back to the leg, and then I can follow up with the gun. So don't get target fixated on the weapon. Understand that just because you have a weapon in your hand, that weapon is an extension of your body. It is a force multiplier. It is by no means nullifying the other assets that you have available to you. So, alright, you guys train hard.